Okay, we are recording.
Okay, thanks, boss. Appreciate you.
Everybody.
All right, what are we doing this morning? We're doing seller's contracts this morning, right? So let's get to the documents. And if you ever can't find forms, that's how I find them. I just go to Google Missouri real estate forms and click on standard forms, and it brings you right to it. And your login information is your first and last name and your NERDS number, the 512 number. But I think I typed wrong because I was talking. And it'll bring you to all the forms, which is great. And you can search them just by name or whatever. And if you put a star by them, they put them in this nice little box right here. So you guys can find them whenever you want to. Let's see, seller's agency listing contract. This is what we need to get signed whenever we are headed to go meet with the client. Or in today's age, all right, I need to make you guys go away. Okay, so can you guys see the entire contract? Somebody just answer me. I don't think I've got you muted right now. Maybe I do. Yep, I do. Hang on just a second. All right, somebody, can you guys see the entire contract?
No.
Yes, top portion.
If you can't, you can close the box over on the right-hand side, or you can narrow the boxes over on the right-hand side with everybody's picture, and hopefully you should be able to see it then.
I'm good.
All right. So I'm going to put you all back on mute, and we'll get rolling here. So again, this is what you want to talk to your sellers, because at any point, once this is signed, you are their agent. And you can get this signed today with everyone in your sphere. You don't have to wait for to be ready to list. But a thing you guys really need to be very conscious of right now is the script of, now is the time to list. Because whenever this COVID thing comes back, I heard it said this morning, it's going to come back like a rubber band, and the market's going to be flooded with properties. So now is the time to be in position for those things to happen. So make sure you guys are having those conversations. But once this is signed, you are their agent. And whenever they're ready to list the property, and I'm going to show you how to enter a property into MLS. Once you do that, that is when the listing begins. But you can be their agent from this point forward. Same thing with the buyer's agent. You can always be someone's agent, even if they are not actively seeking something. You can still be their representative. So you're going to come in and you're going to put the owner's name here in. And if you guys will mute yourselves on your end, that way I don't have to come up here and check, and that way I don't have to watch the notes box. But if you'll just leave yourselves muted on your end, and if you've got a question, just unmute and come back into the conversation, okay? So you're gonna come in here on, again, seller's agency listing contract, exclusive right to sell. Owner's name is gonna go here, whether it's one or more owner, put everybody that's in there. The brokerage name, Keller Williams, goes in line 3. Obviously, the street address, the city, the zip, and the county. If you choose to do so, you can check this box for legal description. I would probably advise you not to, and I think Jim is the same way. Because what happens if we don't check this box is the legal description defaults to whatever the title company finds. And honestly, I would rather the title company be the one to declare what the legal description is rather than me or my seller. So if you've got a form of appraisal and you want to do it, that's fine. You can check the box. And if you do check the box, whatever document you're using, I want you to write legal description across the top of it and then have everybody initial it, because that actually is what makes it the legal description. Then you're going to come down here and line 10, please don't confuse this to be the date that this starts. This is the date that this agreement ends. When everybody signs at the end, this date right here where your owner signs is the effective date that this begins. This date that we're talking about here in paragraph 1 is the date that this particular agreement completes. So if you have a 6-month lease, what is today, the 13th, you would have an expiration of October 13th, 2020, for example. So whatever your time period is, that's going to be your expiration date. And then you guys have agreed to a list price of X. Now, this is the list price as of the date of this particular piece of paper. So if you have a lunch conversation with your client and they will not budge off 103 to get down to 99.9, that's fine. You can write 103 in this blank and everybody can sign this, and then you become their agent. And even if before the property is listed, the client calls you and says, yeah, you're right, we should really list it below 100, go ahead and make it 99.9. Yeah, you don't need to come back and change this. This is whatever the number was agreed to at the time of this signing. Now, if the property were listed, you're still gonna have to do your data sheet addendums for the MLS, but I don't need that here because whatever they sign with their MLS document is the actual list price. And if they've got any special terms, if they're offering a seller's bonus, if there's certain things that they're wanting to keep with the property and not send along its way, anything along those lines you would put in here. And then they're gonna acknowledge that everything that we're gonna do shall constitute us getting paid. And I really like line 14 to 16. Owner will refer all inquiries and prospects owner may receive during the listing period from any source to the realtor to avoid the possibility of confusion over agency relationship and misunderstandings about compensation. You'll hear me say this more than once in both this particular document as well as the buyer's agency document, because they both say the same thing, is everything goes through me. You're hiring me as your agent for a reason. Let me do my job the way I'm supposed to do it. Don't go, doing things on your own. Any contact you get from any person, I need to know about. So I really like that. Just that one little sentence in there to kind of hammer that home to my client. So if a ready, willing, and able buyer is procured, then the owner is going to pay us X. Now on this one, this is a seller's agency. So the seller needs to pay both the listing agent commission as well as the buyer's agent commission. And not to price fix you, but I'm going to use 6%. So I don't want to price fix you guys, but 6 is just an easy number. We're all used to it. That's what I'm going to use. So we need to make sure that we're paying, again, both our commission as well as the buyer's agency. So this would be the full 6. And note right here, it says indicate percentage of sales price or specific dollar amount. Now, I don't think anyone is ever going to accuse you of potentially selling a house for $6. That being said, I don't want to ever have to argue that. So put the percentage or the dollar sign in there. If you're doing a flat rate, they're selling it, a cheap house, they're going to give you $5 grand no matter what. You write $5,000 in there. But normally you're going to have a percentage in there, and just make sure you put your percentage sign on it. Now, protection period. You have worked with this client. You have had showings for this client of this property. Your listing expires today. I have shown a client, one of my clients, this property while you have had the listing. Now, your thing expires today. My client calls me tomorrow and says, I really want that house that we looked at. We make an offer, the property sells, and the seller has not hired another agent, and we sell it within this protection period right here, then you are protected and still earn your commission. If your listing expires today and they hire a new agent tomorrow and my client buys it from the new agent tomorrow, you still do not receive anything because they have hired another agent. So as long as they don't hire someone else during this period, then you are protected. And I'm certain someone wants to unmute themselves and say, what is an appropriate time period? I don't know that there is a magic number. To me, personally, once I get to about 90 days, I begin to question whether or not any of my actions actually caused this person to buy the house. I do know we have agents, top agents in the office that do it 180 days. So I would say anywhere, 6 months or less, I would tell you to get as much time as you can, because as long as that that client doesn't hire another agent, anyone that saw that property during your purview, if they buy that property, then you're due a commission. Now, it's really hard to keep track of it. So you have to be mindful of where the clients are, and know that if someone showed the property, hopefully that agent will be forthcoming with you that, hey, we went ahead and bought the property, but don't bank on that. Don't open a brand new account for all of the protection period money that you're gonna make, because it's not gonna be much, and a lot of times it's tough to defend, but that's what the protection period means. And again, if they hire someone else, you're completely out of the mix. So up here, we are talking about the percentage that our client is going to pay us for selling the house. If you are using a transaction fee that you charge every one of your clients 150 or 250 bucks because that pays your staff or that pays your paperwork. This is where that amount goes right here in line 29. If you're not charging a transaction fee, put 0 in this blank. And you have the ability to accept this money either as of the effective date of this contract. So whatever date this is signed, you can accept the check for your earnest, or not your earnest money, for your transaction fee. Pause for just a second. Sorry, I was wondering why my fingers were going numb, and it was because it was 63 degrees.
Harvest Moon.
What's that?
Crossing.
Okay, so you can accept it today if you do that transaction fee, but what I'm going to tell you is the check has to be made out to Keller Williams. Rachel's not going to cut you a separate check the day that you bring that there. So to me, you're going to have to hold it, and I think it's better just to go ahead and accept it the day of closing as work. That's the way the transactions have been normally going before we had this contract and had the ability to do it before. So I would tell you just to do it as of the day of closing. And if you've written a 0 here, then just check the not applicable box. I keep scrolling back up because up here, the seller has agreed what total commission that they're going to pay for the sale of their house. Down here, we are going to indicate what percentage of that percentage that they're giving us, we're going to give to other people. In the MLS, it is listed as buyer's agent, sub-agent, and transaction broker. In the event that you pay any of those entities a different amount, you just need to be very mindful that these are not in the same order that they are in on the MLS. Not to price fix you, not to standardize you, but to simplify it for you. Typically, I think what we normally see is this. Again, you can charge and give any amount here. So even if you were getting 6 up top, you can even give 3.5 here, and you can make this 2. It's whatever numbers you choose to do, but this is indicating how we're going to pay each of these particular agents. And one more time, just remember that these 3 things are not in the same order that you see them on the MLS. When you join our MLS, we all sign an agreement with the board and the MLS that says, we're going to participate, we're going to pay cooperating brokers, all the rules and regulations that we do. We do have some people in our region that chose not to be part of our regional MLS. That was their choice. They didn't have to. They didn't want the exposure. They didn't want the expense, whatever the case may be. Because we are a part of an association and these forms protect that association, if we choose not to pay those people outside of our MLS, we don't have to. Now, I would tell you, I don't know why you would not pay someone because we want somebody to sell the property. So you have the option to not pay them if you choose to do so. And that's what that blank is for. Again, I don't think that you will probably run into that a whole lot. As well as line 49, I don't think you'll use a whole lot. It essentially says, we're going to exclude the following broker, person, whatever from this transaction. So they had a bad experience with ABC Realty. You can write ABC Realty right here in this box that the owner will not accept offers or showings from anyone from ABC Realty. They have the ability to limit and do that if they choose to do so. They also have the ability to limit Cousin Eddie from buying the property. Now, they can't limit Cousin Eddie from buying the property from any of the protected classes, but if Cousin Eddie's just been a jerk to the family for 50 years, that's reason enough that they cannot sell the property to him. So you might use this occasionally. I don't think you'll run into either of these very much. 48, as I said, to me, I want to pay whoever wants to bring me a buyer for my property. So I'm not going to necessarily exclude someone just because they're not part of our MLS. Does the seller want people to know why they're selling the property? If they're transferring or whatever and they don't care and they check, if you check does, you must have something written in this box. If you check does not, you may leave this box blank because obviously they don't want people to know. All right, 54 and 55 are, to me, kind of big deals. 54 gives me the permission from my seller to tell other agents that we have active offers on the property. To me, that's a no-brainer. If you're sending me an offer, hey, I just want to let you know we've already got one on the table that we're going to respond to by 5 o'clock tonight. To me, that's common courtesy. I want to be able to do that. 55 goes one step further. it allows me to disclose terms of the offer I currently have on the table. I'm going to pause for dramatic effect because this can be used the wrong way, and I don't want you guys using it the wrong way. This is not with the intent of trying to undercut another agent, anything along those lines. To me, it is more of, if you call me and tell me that you're going to send me a $100,000 offer with $2,500 in closing costs and an FHA loan, I want the ability to be able to tell you, I've already got 100 cash on the table with no contingencies, because it saves you time. It saves my client time. If you can bring me a better offer, great. But I'm not utilizing it just to try to bait you to bring me a better offer. It's more of a common courtesy. Don't waste your or my time, because I've already got something that's going to beat that. So I really want you guys, if at all possible, to have does checked on both of these boxes, because even though you may never utilize it, it at least gives you permission to utilize these tools if you need to. And I think that's really important. Current representation agreement. And again, it says you're going to follow the code of ethics and standard practice up here under these disclosure of terms, which that's what you guys need to do. I don't want you using it maliciously, as I said. Current representation agreement. Most often, whoever you approach or whoever approaches you is not going to be working with another agent. You've found them through your sphere. You found them through your, oops, somebody's talking. You found them however you need to. Did somebody have a question? Nope. Okay. So most often they're not going to be under an agreement. However, and most often you're going to check is not and move on. The example would be, this is my client, and for whatever reason, my client is not happy with me, and my client has reached out to you. You have not crossed my sign. My client has reached out to you and said, hey, Don's not doing a very good job. When his listing expires, will you take over as our listing agent? You can absolutely say yes, and you can absolutely go have a conversation with them about selling their property, even though they're under an agreement with me. So if that were the case, you would check that they are, or in this case is, under an agreement, and you would write the expiration date of the agreement that I am currently under with that seller. So most often, as I said, they're not going to be under an agreement. But if they were working with me or another agent, you would put the expiration date of whatever their current listing agreement was, and that they is. So again, most often it's going to be is not. Did I lose anybody there? Sometimes that one's hard for people to get a hold of. Okay, most often it's going to be is not. And the other thing that this is another opportunity to have a conversation with your client to say everything goes through me, in case there are unscrupulous agents out there that happen to call your client and say, hey, if you're not happy with the way Don's doing his job, I can come talk to you and I can take over as soon as his expires. That is unethical and illegal. So you need to make sure your client knows if they get those calls, they need to report it to you immediately. Okay? Owner disclosures. Your owner is going to fill out disclosures. That is part of our E&O insurance. Every property that we list must have at least the mandatory 4 filled out on disclosure forms. Obviously, I want you guys to try to get your clients to fill them out completely. And while we're on the disclosures, what I would tell you is either print them or send them where they can, sign and fill. And I don't know what the new DocuSign is going to be, but so they have the ability to fill them out. I do not want you guys filling out your owner's seller's disclosures. It's the seller's job to fill those out. Get that as soon as possible. So when you go to have the conversation with this document about the list date, they've already got the disclosures filled out for you and it's ready to go. You can put it in the packet, you can put it in the listing and move on down the road. Because those are things that you've got to have on the MLS within the 4-day time period, or you're going to get fined. So you need to make sure that that is happening. So most often, again, not most often, you're always going to have does checked. And the owner says that everything that they put in the disclosure statement is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge, and that they will fully and promptly disclose in writing to any new information pertaining to the property that is discovered or made known during the listing period. Come down here to 73. So first of all, they're going to tell us anything that comes up. Hopefully we're in communication and that happens anyway. Somebody's not muted, and I'm not sure who it is, but I keep getting a little feedback, and I'm sure everybody else is too. So make sure you're on mute. Line 73. Owner further agrees to promptly furnish Realtor with all inspection reports, if any, regarding the property, and authorizes Realtor to disclose and provide such reports to any prospects. So what does that mean in regular terms? That means I've got a client, we've got the property listed, we had a buyer come in, do inspections, they sent us an inspection request, we couldn't get on the same page with repairs, and the deal died. You bring me an offer that we get on the same page with, and then I send you the disclosure or the inspection report from the previous one, because it is my job as a Realtor to disclose any and all adverse material facts I know about a property. So what's the easiest way for me to do that? Send the report where I learned all of the adverse material facts about the property. But this in effect gives us permission to share that inspection report. I don't want you guys putting it on the MLS. It's not everybody's business. And it's really not everybody's business that's going to look at the property. To me, this comes into play when someone sends you an offer, because then it's the time to be the most forthcoming, or you know that they're going to send you an offer. I wouldn't just send this to everybody that's going to look at the property, because in a lot of respects, it might scare people off, because we don't know, if the report's bad, then we might have issues. If the report's bad and we fix things, at least we've got some ground to stand on. So just keep in mind that we can provide that, and we're actually obligated to provide that to any prospects for the property. Notice of intended sale. Your seller's doing repairs on the property because of inspection requests, or they are finishing up a contract with something else. Make sure everybody that's getting service, that's doing service to the property, is getting paid or knows the property is going to be sold, so those bills can be paid by the seller, and that the buyer does not get saddled with the lien on the property, because we certainly don't want that to happen to the buyer if we can provide it. So we just need to make sure that the seller has got all the bills hopefully paid either prior to or on the settlement statement, but at least the fact that they have agreed and know that they're going to pay all of those. We've already checked that we're doing a proper seller's disclosure statement up here. Lead-based paint. If the property is after 1978, it is exempt, and you check box 1. If it is 78 or before, then it is not exempt, and you check box 2, and you attach the lead-based paint form. In addition to the disclosures and the lead-based paint that we have attached, the owner is also indicating that they don't know of any proposed subdivision, homeowners association, or condominium assessments, no other adverse material facts which will negatively affect the property, and that all mechanical elements will be working at the time of closing. If we know that the stove is not going to be working at the time of closing, go ahead and make a note of it on the blank lines on the last page of this, just so it's noted. And obviously note that in the MLS, in the agent only remarks, that stove not to be working at time of closing. Most often that's not going to be an issue, but if you're certifying this, the owner is certifying by signing this that all of those things are going to be working, and that they're going to pay off all the loans. If they are a foreign person, you probably know about it, but this is not a this is essentially an illegal alien. Anybody that is here, a citizen resident, or a citizen or a resident alien, they're fine. And most often they're going to know that. When in doubt, there is a fantastic government website right here, and I'm sure we've all been sharing and spending and going to see the government websites lately. But here's another one for you if you have any questions about that. Indemnity. This is a great paragraph for you guys. Owner agrees to hold us and anybody that's affiliated with us against any actions, claims, demands, suits, or lawsuits coming out of them not giving us correct information. If they misrepresent and anything comes out of that, then it's not on us. So as long as we don't know something that's wrong, if we know it, we've obviously got to disclose it. We've got to make sure that's there, so that whether it's on the property data form, seller's disclosure, for claims made by a buyer, tenant, or other third party. So that opens the door to anybody with respect to omissions or errors contained in the information given to us. And we shall not be responsible in any manner for such errors or omissions. So just make sure you tell them it's going to come up. So just go ahead and tell me now. And that's usually the conversation I have with sellers disclosures is it's going to come out in the inspection anyway. So you may as well just go ahead and tell me and tell them now in the seller's disclosure statement, because if it's obvious that you've known about this for a long time, we may have issues with the buyer at that point. So just go ahead and give me a full set of disclosures. Title and survey, sellers indicating they're going to provide clean title at the time at closing. And if they have a survey, they're going to provide it that we can send on and attach to our MLS. Taxes and assessments, everybody's going to pay for the portion that they are in the property. So it will be prorated as such. Earnest money and liquidated damages. Earnest money. This states that, this particular contract states that if there is a property that falls out of contract through no fault of the realtor, and the realtor had real and actual expenses. So that would be you paid to have the septic lid uncovered. That is not you spent gas money or you bought lunch for your client. That is actual incurred expenses. You are entitled to get that money back, split 50-50 with the, excuse me, you are entitled to get your money back after the owner gets back any expenses that they have incurred. So as with the protection period, I would not go opening a brand new bank account for all of the earnest money that you're going to get back. Odds are you're never going to see a dime, but this allows for, if there is money left over, you are entitled to get your expenses back. And then if there's money left over after everyone is paid, then you split it 50-50. But as I said, I don't foresee you guys really getting earnest money checks probably ever, but this at least provides you an opportunity if it is there, gives you a chance to get it. We are going to put your property on the MLS. We are going to cooperate with other brokers, and we're going to pay them like we talked about on page 1 with the indication of the percentages that we were going to give each particular agent. And we're going to put a lockbox on your property. Now, you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are going to hold me harmless, provided I haven't done anything malicious with any of those things. So you shall not indemnify or hold lockbox users harmless for claims arising out of the intentional or gross neglect of lockbox users. So what does that mean? That means I want you guys to make sure your lockboxes, you're doing a diligent job of hiding them, giving them to your client. And honestly, that's what I'm doing right now, giving them to the clients and letting the clients set them outside whenever we know we're going to have a showing. A lot of times if you've got a vacant, you can't do that, but put it somewhere that hopefully it's not going to be easily stolen or stolen at all, and somewhere that it's not easily seen. Because if a claim arises out of the fact that, well, Don's lockbox was sitting right there on the front stoop where everybody could see it, and the lockbox gets stolen and broken into and things get eliminated from the house, it could come back on me because I may have been neglectful with my lockbox. So just be conscious of that. Same thing on the MLS, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a second, that you need to make sure the client is aware of what's going on the MLS, picture-wise, comment-wise, so they know what we're putting out to the public. Advertising, you're essentially getting permission to do everything that you want to do here as far as advertising. If your client wants to limit you in any way, then they can certainly cut back on that. But I don't know why they wouldn't want you to do a specific thing. But if there's anything they don't want you doing, you can put it in specific lines on the last page. Owner agrees that the realtor and cooperating brokers in their respective license can show the property to prospects, as well as lenders, appraisers, and inspections, and third party deemed necessary, as well as taking photographs, and I'm skipping guys kind of through, photographs and videotapes of interior and exterior located upon reasonable notice to the owner. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there are going to be people through your property. Obviously, in the current state of affairs, there are fewer people through the property than normal. However, the conversation to have is there are going to be people through your property. So if you don't want it seen, recorded, photographed, or transmitted, family photos, paperwork, person identifiable information, put it away. If you don't want it seen in pictures, put it away. And hey, guess what? If you don't want it taken when people are potentially showing the property, put it away. You are liable for anything that is on your property that is seen or taken. I'm putting you on notice here in paragraph 7 that it is up to you to insure anything that there is on the property, to cover anything in case of loss, theft, or damage. And by the way, we've got a walkthrough period that the client can do at the end. And if you move out of your property, you can transfer the utilities to the buyer up to 4 days ahead of time. Now, please note, the buyer doesn't have to agree to that. The seller doesn't have to agree to it. This is a mutual agreement. If the property's empty and we want the utilities in the buyer's name before closing, you have the ability to do that. Kind of a strange place in the contract for that, but that's where it is, because we're talking about putting everything away and ensuring property. So to me, the nuts and bolts of paragraph 7 is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you don't want it seen or taken, put it away. And hopefully you guys are helping with some staging and doing that stuff anyhow, but that's the conversation to have, is this isn't on me if that $20 bill gets stolen out of the basket where you throw the keys every day because you just forgot. That's not on me. That's on you. If you don't want it seen, put it away. If you don't want it taken, put it away. Speaking of seen, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I've noticed that you have a Nest doorbell out front and a camera here in the kitchen. That is well within your rights to have cameras within your property. That being said, I want you to know that any liability that comes out of you listening to recordings of potential other clients while they're in the property is not on me, it's on you. I will not listen to that as an agent because it's illegal for me to eavesdrop on other agents' conversations and unethical. But if you choose to do that and litigation arises out of that, it's not my fault. I'm not going to be held harmful for that. So flip side of that coin, just real quick, you guys need to keep in mind when you're working with buyers, somebody's always listening. Those little Alexa dots that you have in your kitchen that you're talking to all the time, there's a website that you can go find, enter your information, and you can see a transcript of every word that you've ever said since you plugged that in. So I want your buyers to be conscious of that somebody's always listening. And your sellers too, is just because you can doesn't mean you should, and I'm not gonna. So I don't want you guys eavesdropping on other people's conversations, but you need to let them know that it's on you if you have litigation arise out of that. Paragraph 9, warranty program. Are we gonna offer one? Are we not gonna offer one? Or would we consider it at a later date? If at all possible, I want you guys to offer one. Your property shows better, it lists better, and it's just a better product overall. If your client doesn't want to buck up for it right now, please try to do this, consider at a later date, because then at least we already have been given permission to have this conversation with our client when we get an offer that asks for a home warranty versus them saying, I'm not going to offer a home warranty. And some will say that, but try to get them on either offer a home warranty or at least consider at a later date. Legal and professional advice. I am a realtor by trade. I am not a tax guy. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a surveyor. I'm not a mechanical expert. If you need help finding those people, I will certainly help you secure those people. But those people is not me. I know things about houses, and that's where my expertise in this particular transaction ends. Default and remedy. I hope we get along to this entire particular transaction, Mr. Seller, but if we don't, and I have to take you to court to get my fees, you're going to end up paying my legal fees as well, provided that I win. Franchise disclosure. You guys are part of a franchise, so check the box at 178. Essentially, it says that if they're going to sue us, they're going to sue you, and they're going to sue this particular company, not the entire KW system. Equal opportunity. Mr. Seller, we're going to show this property to everybody. If you try to exclude me from selling it to any particular protected class, really, in my opinion, anyone other than Cousin Eddie, because he's been a jerk to the family, I'm not going to represent you. You need to go find somebody else. So just keep in mind that we can't exclude anybody from looking at the property, gang. That's a big deal, and you don't want to be on the part of any investigation. Okay, 14, when you enter, hang on a second. When you enter into this particular contract, you are a seller's limited agent, working solely for the seller. All your best interests are in the sellers. So you're going to, in the last 2 pages of this, essentially diagram what all of that means. But I'm going to work solely for you and do everything I can for you. When this particular document is signed, your client is hiring Keller Williams Greater Springfield to be their broker. You will put your name right here because Keller Williams, as your broker, is going to designate you as the agent to work with this client. So if you and I were working together on a deal, your name and then my name would need to be on here. If you are on a team, any licensed team member that will be speaking to this client about this property needs to be listed here. If there's not enough blanks, put an attachment. But Anybody that's licensed other than Jim or myself, as we are registered brokers for the office, that will be speaking to this client needs to be on here. So if you've got an issue with the client, you can't just go down the hall and have another agent call them because they've not been designated to do so. So just make sure whoever's working with it, most often if you're a single agent, it's just going to be you that's going to be on there. When these forms go live, Jim or my signature will be here already. If you write one right now, you can just send it to us. We can sign it electronically and shoot it right back to you. And the date, fill in the date, whatever that is, even though the signature will have a date on it. So the document hires Keller Williams. We, Keller Williams, designate you as the agent to work with this client, and you enter into this contract working solely as a seller's agent. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I would like to have permission in the event I find a buyer that meets their needs, that your house fulfills that. So I would like permission in the event I find that buyer to work with both you as well as the buyer in a dual agency situation. So I would like you right now to give me permission to be a dual agent. I am not a dual agent until I actually have a buyer. Until that point, I am solely your agent working only for you. And the last 2 pages also explain what I can and can't do as a dual agent as far as communicating things to you and the buyer. There is a wall between the two of you, and I can only communicate things when I'm given permission to do so. But I would like to have permission now in the event that that situation comes up to be a dual agent. So you're going to check yes there, and I really want you guys getting this checked every time if you can. Get yes checked there, and then again, they're going to allow the brokerage to be a dual agency, and then the brokerage is going to allow you to be a designated dual agent. So you're going to check yes there as well. Transaction brokerage, I don't want to spend really any time on it because transaction brokerage is tough to do. I believe we actually have a class that you're supposed to go through in order to do it, because you can't advise, consult, direct in any way, shape, or form the client. You can fill out the paperwork for them based on the numbers they tell you they want in those blanks. And that is really tough to do. And the odds are you guys are never going to convert to a transaction broker. So to make this easy, I just want at 231, I want the box to be no. And at 236, I want the box to be no. Bang. You don't have to worry about transaction brokerage at all. Paragraph 15 talks about the minimum brokerage services as defined in our Missouri statutes. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to accept and deliver all of the offers and counter offers. I'm going to assist you in developing, communicating, and negotiating those offers. And I'm going to answer any questions you have about those. Sounds pretty minimal, right? That's why it says minimal brokerage services. I'm obviously going to do those things for my client. You guys are going to do so much more, but the statute requires us to put that in there about the things that we promise to do no matter what. So make sure that your client understands I will be doing more than this for you, but this is what the state tells me that I've got to let you know that we'll be doing. If you are part of the transaction, so you are the buyer, you are the seller, you are going to, you have any kind of indirect ownership on the property through an LLC or anything like that, you've got to disclose it. Or if you're working with an immediate family member, parents, siblings, and children are immediate family members. Personally, I disclose aunts, uncles, and cousins and grandparents because I don't see any reason not to. So, but the minimum 3 that you have to are parents, children, and siblings is you have to disclose immediate family members. And that would include the brother-in-law and the sister-in-law and those kinds of things as well, okay? Special agreements, as I talked about, if there's anything specific that the seller wants in here or that you need to make note of. Now, I shouldn't say really like, I would somewhat encourage you, if you've got a seller being very particular about putting a lot of restraints on you. You know, I only want it shown from 5 to 6 on Tuesday night. I need a 3-hour advance warning so I can get the dog taken care of. I want you to come turn on all the lights and take. If there is a list of details or anything that may preclude you from being able to freely show this property, other than the COVID-19, because we all understand that, but anything that might preclude you from being able to show this property effectively, I want you to go ahead and make a note of it here. And I hope that you never have to use it. But if you get that call in 3 or 4 weeks and the client says, why haven't we had any offers? You could potentially come back to this special agreement section and say, well, Jim, you told me that we could only show the property on Tuesday and Thursday nights between 5 and 6. And that truly just doesn't work for everybody's schedule. So I'm certain that we're missing out on some potential buyers because of the restraint that we're putting on the ability to show the property. So if we could do anything to stretch that out, that might be great. So as I said, I hope you don't have to ever come back and utilize your client's words against them. But if you ever feel like you might have a pushback in the future, it's just okay with me. Go ahead and make a note of it here, so we're all on the same page about the conversation that we have. Signatures due to the Missouri Uniform Electronic Transmissions Act. We can sign this from anywhere. This is a Missouri document, so the property obviously has to be in Missouri, but you don't have to be. Your client doesn't have to be. Anyone can sign from anywhere, and it's considered good. All right, 270. I want you to check this box right here. And I'll promise to come back up and do 19. Sometimes I forget. Because what 270 says is that any email that originates from this owner's email address right here to this agent's address right here constitutes notice. So if I am driving down the road this morning, I had to go to, well, let's say I was able to go to Kansas City. I'm on the road driving, and my client calls me. We had talked yesterday about reducing the price, below that $100,000 threshold, and they were just fighting it, didn't want to do it. And I said, now's the time to do it if we're going to do it. They didn't do it, fine. So we left it at 103. I'm driving down the road this morning. I get a call from my client that says, okay, you're right. Let's go ahead and drop that price. I can tell that client, send me an email from your email address listed on whatever or on the employment agreement. So hopefully they know which one that is, to my email address. And once you receive that email, that is notice that allows you to change the listing price on the MLS. Currently, you will still be required to do a data sheet addendum for compliance. As we are still going through transitions and there's so many other things in the air right now, I haven't changed that. Once we get all of the DocuSign, all the documents, everything up and running and smooth, then I will have a conversation with compliance that will allow you to submit this email in lieu of the data sheet addendum. But it has to come from, again, this particular email address to this particular email address. It can't be a text. They can't write Jim@Hotmail right here on the email address and send it to you from Susie@Hotmail, unless Susie happens to be the other owner and her address is here. You have the ability to put up to 2 agents here. So if you were on a team, or if you and I were working together, you want to put email addresses in both places because it allows for either of us to receive the email and make that effective change. So check this box. It allows you to make changes via an email instead of a data sheet addendum. But as I said, you will still have to do a data sheet addendum currently, as compliance will still require. And we'll cross that bridge in the future. 19, most often you're just going to skip this one completely and leave it blank. But go back to the example where my client wasn't happy with me and they called you. Again, you didn't call them or cross my sign. They called you and said, would you take over when Don's agreement expires? And let's suppose my agreement expires 6/13, which is what we would have put in the blank on page 1. We would have put expiration date. Okay, let's change that so it's not confusing. Let's say my expiration date up here on page 1, because they were working under an agreement, and the expiration date of the agreement that the seller had with me was 6/30/2020. So the end of the month, or end of June was when mine expired. I'm being a real pain in the whatever and not going to let them out of their listing agreement. So they're just going to have to ride the wave with me till the end. So mine expires on 6/30. The date that you would put for your effective date at the end would then be 7/1/2020. Mine expires at midnight. Yours kicks in at 12/01. So as I said, most often you're not going to use this. Most often your effective date of the beginning of this contract is going to be this date right here, whenever the seller actually signs the document. But if they happen to be under another agreement, that's when this particular effective date comes into play. Keller Williams goes here. Your signature, your name. Obviously, in this particular case, you do want to put your email address. I do not care about your title, and then the date. And your date will obviously be part of your signature. I don't think compliance is kicking it back for that, but you have to have your name, your signature, and your date to make things compliant for the state. In this case, like I said, you certainly want to put your email address on there because that's going to allow that communication back and forth. Same thing with your owner. I need their signature, their printed name, In this case, the email address and the date, which will already be taken care of in their signature. Owner's address is up to you whether you fill it in. It's not required by compliance. I would think most often the owner's address will be the property you're selling, but if it's not, this is a great place to keep it because then you can always reference this as to what the actual address is. And if you need additional places for signatures, I believe there's actually a document now that's additional signature page. But if not, you can just attach one that says additional signatures and have people sign there. All right, that's the end of the employment agreement. I will pause for dramatic effect and questions. Going once. Going twice. And if you're talking to me and haven't unmuted, I can't hear you. All right, going 3 times. Your client will obviously need to fill out seller's disclosure statement. Make sure I get the right one. So property address is required. You don't have to fill this information in. As I said, the only thing that is required by law are these 4 items. The meth house, is lead-based paint, was it a landfill, or are there any radioactive materials? Your client does not have to fill out anything other than those 4 boxes. Check those 4 boxes, so to speak. But obviously I encourage you to fill out as much information as you can because it just makes your listing look better to other potential buyers as well as agents. Because I don't know about if I'm the only one, but sometimes if I get a one where they've got this box right here checked that says they elect to make no additional disclosures, makes me wonder what they know that they're not letting me know. Now, if it's somebody that's out of state, I certainly understand. But if somebody's lived in the property and they're not making disclosures, personally, when I make an offer, I ask them to fully execute seller's disclosures. So I get a fully, and sometimes they say no, but at least I've asked for it. And it's pretty obvious what these things are. And again, I want you guys having your sellers fill these out. In the event that you have a seller that doesn't feel capable or competent to fill these out on their own, you can sit directly in front of them, and then I want you to read every single thing to them. Tell me about your air conditioning system. Is it central electric, central gas, window or wall unit, solar? And check the box exactly as they say yes or no. Because I never want it come back on you guys that you filled these out. But if you filled them out with the assistance of the seller, that's okay. But most often I just want you guys sliding these across the table or sending them to them electronically and having them fully execute them themselves. And if they don't know certain things, it's okay to leave it blank. But I want to know everything that they do know about the property, as does a potential buyer. I don't think there's really anything specific that will throw you guys a curveball on this. It's all pretty straightforward. Subdivisions, if they've got a copy of the covenants, that would be great to get. If they don't, most often the title company can get that for you. If there's anything that they know about the homeowners association, is great to go ahead and attach to the listing because it just provides that much extra information for the client. Lead-based paint. Pretty obvious or pretty straightforward too. On some of the Missouri documents, this reference bar is still at the top. On most of them, it's been eliminated, but if you find one like the lead-based paint where it is, just write the property address in it and do it the same way on any box that you find. That way it's all congruent through the document. Most of them are gone, and I thought they were eliminating this one this year, but it's still here. So the seller is indicating whether or not they know of lead-based paint or have no knowledge. So most often they're probably going to check here, and whether they have any reports. They provided all the reports or they have no reports. So seller needs to execute A and B. This is where the purchaser takes care of it. F is you being the listing agent, because it is your duty as an agent to notify the client that they have obligations underneath 42 USC 4852D, which is a statute that says if they know about lead-based paint, they've got to disclose it or they're violating the law. So we have to let them know, if you know about it, you've got to disclose it. And we've got to initial off here that, yes, we told the seller their rights and responsibilities. Seller signs here, you sign here, purchaser takes care of it here. And even though you've written the property address up here in this reference line, it goes down here at the bottom along with the listing number. All right, give me just a second, gang. Let me get to, I need to add one here. If you got any questions, now would be a good time while I'm getting us to our next phase here. Just a couple other forms that you guys will need to have when you're in here. HSA application, I would tell you to try to, as we talked about in the actual listing contract, it's a great thing to have on your listing. It just shows better. I think it provides better service to the buyers when they buy the property. And to me, this is the easiest part right here to sell it. Seller and buyer coverage. Hey, guess what, Mr. Seller? You sign up for this home warranty and I do my diligence and send it to these numbers right here and get you registered, and you have an issue during the listing process, you're covered too for the same deductible that we've signed up for here. So it's, to me, that's an easy sell, because if you have a problem during a listing, all you have to do is pay the deductible. They'll come look at it, they'll take care of it, and we can move on down the road. And if the property doesn't sell, they don't have to pay for it. They pay for the warranty at closing. Either way, once again, for our E&O insurance, we either have to have that they've accepted it or that they've waived the right to buy one. So in your E&O. Now, an important thing for you guys to know as part of your E&O coverage, if you have a home warranty in place and an E&O claim comes on because of this property, your deductible is covered if you have a home warranty in place. Once again, I'll pause for dramatic effect. If you do not have a home warranty, you'll be paying your 70% of the deductible. I believe the deductible is $5,000. So let that sink in a minute and give you some motivation to try to sell some home warranties as well. Because if you have an active home warranty on a property and there's an E&O claim on that property, your deductible is waived. Because it's easier for them to defend it when there's a home warranty in place. So keep that in mind. Either way, for your contract paperwork, you either have to have an acceptance or a waiver in every file for both buyer and seller for our E&O. Everybody should be familiar with this one from class. Disclosure form indicates what all of the responsibilities and agent duties are. And at the end of the seller's employment agreement, there were 2 pages that talk about what the seller's agent does, what the dual agent does, and what the transaction broker does. I'm sorry, I didn't scroll far enough for you guys to see that, but that's all it does is explain what each of those things are. So if your client has questions, you can say, here's the things I can and can't do as a dual agent. I think you guys probably have all that from class still, so I don't usually go over that. But it shows all of our stuff. They'll have to initial it here, all of the agencies that we offer. And again, transaction, you've got to do a little bit extra in order to do that. It's got all of our information. And you also need to have this document for both buyer and seller, but in this case, the seller, because it's saying that we, as Keller Williams, have affiliated relationships with clients. We are not taking kickbacks, but we have to let you know that we do have an association with these clients in which they do give us money every year, and we assign that to a certain, I don't think it tells where we assign it, but we have to notify everybody that we're working with these people and just let them know it's not a kickback situation. It's just we have received money from these clients to be part of our vendor program. Okay? And you'll notice this one right here, you can't download it because there's no document there. So when we've got a listing, we're going to have to create the actual residential listing document. And guess where we're going to do that? Anyone? Bet you can guess. hoping everyone can get to this particular location. Click on the flex. And pretty simple, we're going to add a listing. Now, let's come back to, hang on just a second, guys. I'm trying to get, can't see all of my tabs. All right, so when Flex, and you're going to see in a minute that Flex is going to pull some information for us when we add this listing. Let's go ahead and get something started here. So property type, we're just going to do residential. It's going to auto-populate your information here. If you are co-listing with someone else, then you can put their information in here. Regular or parent, or excuse me, parent or child listing. Most often it's going to be a regular listing where you're not going to have anything attached to it. There are two different kinds of parent and children. If you had a property that was a house and 20 acres, and your client would sell the entire house and 20 acres, but your client would also sell the house and 10 acres and sell 10 acres, or they might also sell 15 acres in the house with 5. If there are other means in which they might dispose or just get rid of this property, those become the children. Make the parent the main property, and then anything else, make those the children, and you'll attach those MLS numbers to the parent number, the parent MLS number. And what that does is if I'm doing a search for 10 acres, I can see, okay, here's a 10-acre lot, and it's going to say, also see this property, and then it will take me to the parent listing where I can see the 20 full acres, and it will also link me to the other children where I can see that I could buy 5 or 15 or whatever the case may be. Another case of parent and child would be, I've got a package listing, and rather than put them all under one particular listing number, I list the nicest one underneath the parent, and then I attach the 3 or 4 or dozen other properties as children. So when someone's looking at 123 Main Street, it brings them back to the main property as well as links them to all of the other properties. So most often you're just going to have a regular listing instead of a parent, but just note that if you've got multiple ways to do it, that becomes the children. If it's in pink, it's got to be filled in. Actually, I'll take you back. It doesn't have to be all the way. Does anybody have a property that they want looked up right now while we're doing this, that they haven't already entered in the MLS? No? Okay. When Flex pulls information, which it's going to in a minute, it's going to pull some information from tax data. It pulls from the CRS data. So to me, when you guys look things up, I would encourage you to use the CRS data for your lookup because it's going to be the easiest place to find things. And you can enter your property address here. I'm just going to use this one because it's normally the one I use for my examples. So my tax ID number is right here. I can highlight that, which is what I usually do, copy it, and come back to my ad listing. Oh, it went back on me. Hang on just a second. And if I put the county in here and the city, and I paste my tax data in there, and be careful because sometimes it gives you extra spaces at the beginning, and I click this populate button, it gives me the property address right there. It already does it. And when I click next, it's going to make sure that this is where the property is. So I want you guys to make sure that you're looking at this map because this is what's going to be shown to the public. So we want to make sure that we're getting them to the property correctly. So if you know this property is actually up here, just click on the pin and move it. And now you'll see in a minute that it's put in some information for me. It's put in the owner's name. It's given me some square footage numbers, etc. So when you're going to a listing, I try to fill in as much information as I can in this document before I go. And then I come up here and I click this Save Incomplete button. And I wait for a second because this takes a moment. And then I can come over here and I can actually print this listing. And I know I'm 100 years old and I've been in real estate way too long, but I really like to print a paper input form and take it with me to the client's house. And I'll show you why when it pops up. Everything that I fill in is already going to be populated. So we've obviously, we haven't done much, but I've already got the property address in here, the tax ID, the subtype. And if it's got an asterisk here, it's going to be in pink on the MLS, which means it has to have information in it. So if we've gone through and filled in this information as best we can without actually being in the property, I like having the paper copy with me, because in the marketing remarks, I can take notes about all the stuff that the client loves about the property. In the agent only remarks, I can take notes about any specific instructions that the client has for showings. And the thing that I really like is, as I'm walking through the house, I can actually check that there's a family room and how we're going to show it and what appliances we're leaving with it. I can check those things off on a paper copy as I walk through. And especially when it comes to utilities, water heater and furnace, you will encounter clients that honestly don't know if they have gas or electric. And you can walk right over to the door, open it, verify what it is, and check it on your box. And also, if you do not own, I'm kind of scrolling through here, guys, because we're going to cover all this in just a minute. If you don't own a magic little room measuring device that shoots a laser to one end and comes back and gives you a measurement, go spend 15 bucks and buy one. Because as you're walking through the property, talking to the seller about listing it and taking notes of the flooring, the countertops, all of the details that you need, you can also be measuring the rooms in a matter of seconds. You can ding it to one end, ding it to the other, and I know the living room is 15 by 22. Because it makes your listing look better when you have those room dimensions in it. It makes your listing longer when you have room dimensions in it. So please take the time to do it, and it's a whole lot faster with that measure, because you can be in and out of a room in no time and know the measurements and attach it to your listing. So as I said, I'm old, you don't have to do it this way, but I really like attaching this to, taking this paper copy with me to a listing. Somebody have a question? All right, I need this to go away. Sorry guys, my whole screen here is kind of, there we go. Maybe. Well, you've got me stuck in a queue here I can't get out of. Please bear with my technology one moment. All right. So anytime you can save your listing and move on. So we're going to go back and we're going to start completing our information. Single family dwelling. Is it a vacation or is it an auction, or excuse me? Yeah. Is it under auction? Is it a vacation rental? And if someone tells you that they do have a vacation rental, make sure that they've gone through the proper steps for that. You can't just declare that you're going to have a VRBO or a bed and breakfast or anything like that. You actually, now the city and the county require you to go through certain steps, specifically with your neighbors and your proximities and so forth. So make sure that they've actually done that and they're not just telling you that, because you don't want to necessarily advertise it that you can do that and then find out that the buyer cannot. Begin date and end date, you may not know this specifically whenever you go to the client's house, but keep in mind, if I check 14 right here and I complete every pink field and I click add listing, as of 12:01 tonight, that is going live. So it automatically goes whatever this date is. We have some new regulations that if you have any kind of advertising for the property, you have 1 day to get this active on the MLS. So don't be advertising things on Facebook, on anywhere, unless you've got this property loaded and up and going on the MLS, because then we can have issues. End date, whatever your end date ends up being. Your initial list price, if you know that before you go, that's great. Odds are, if you haven't actually been and sat down with the client and gone over your CMA, you're not going to know what that is. So it may be blank, hopefully, well, not hopefully, but maybe blank. You'll hopefully have your piece of paper with you that you can write that down while you're there. List price per square foot, I don't necessarily worry about that. Again, if it's in pink, you have to do it. If it's not in pink, you can leave it blank. The more things you fill out, the longer your listing becomes. If it's under construction, completion date, same thing with parent and child here, if it is a parent and child. If it's in a historic district and you don't know the status, go ahead and put yes and put status unknown. Because that means a big deal to a lot of people that are looking for those tax credits for those historical areas. So if you know it's in a historic district but don't know what's going on with it, just write status unknown and let somebody else, if you can do the research, that's great, but I'm not putting that on you. Let somebody else do that if that's the case. Is it a foreclosure or short sale? If it is, there's other conversations we need to have. Is there a reserve item? Do they want to keep the chandelier in the front room? Are they taking the 6-burner Viking stove out of the kitchen and replacing it with something else? If they are, you need to make sure that the at least other agent knows about that, and that hopefully you're not promoting that stove in your photos, because some buyers will look at that and say, oh, I'll buy that house just for that stove. So you need to make sure people are on notice if you're taking items such as that they're not staying with the property. But this is where you put reserve items. Hopefully this little blank is enough area to write that down. But if not, you can put see attached and you can attach a document if there are a number of things. All right, phone to show. This is a tricky one, gang. I particularly want as many of these of your listings, I want the communication going through you. That may not always be the best route, especially with the situation we have going on now. I mean, people may it may be one of those your client would prefer to take care of some of those things themselves, which is fine. Keep in mind though, if you put your client's number on this phone to show blank and your listing happens to expire or even doesn't, and we have unscrupulous agents out there, you have given your client's phone number to 12 or 1,400 agents across the area. I personally don't want to do that. So I try to keep all of that information to myself. So normally what I've got here is phone to show agent. Showing instructions, what are the specific things? You know, we've got the client that only wants 5 to 6 on Tuesday. I'm not going to spell it right. Agreement type, you guys are going to be under exclusive right to sell. Hopefully you will have a sign on the property. Sign on the property classified as marketing. So if you put a sign in the yard today, your property better be on the MLS tomorrow. Okay? What subdivision is it in? If you don't know, the great thing is, and it does not populate this from CRS because some subdivisions have different phases and it just doesn't read it the right way. But you can come right here and we can determine, okay, it's Merriman's second edition. And then I can come back and scroll down, and wherever Merriam would be, click it and go. I'm obviously not doing all the right things because you don't need to see the right stuff. So cross street, kind of important. If there is a cross street that's easily identifiable, go ahead and fill that in. The real estate tax and the tax year were automatically populated. Real estate tax provided by assessor records. Even though it's not in pink, I want you guys to visualize this being that way, because by doing this, this number becomes the assessor's problem and not yours. So if it is way off, we got those numbers from the assessor. I'm sorry, that's what they told us it was. This is not on me. They've also populated the legal description. If for whatever reason it doesn't, I want you to do kind of what we did with the tax ID number. I want you to actually come to the legal description. And I want you to just cut and paste it, because there is a definite difference between the first edition, lot 135, and the second edition, lot 135, as well as the second edition, lot 136. And I know certain agents that have, maybe me, that have transcribed things. And we'll talk about that in directions here in a minute as well. But copy and paste is probably your best bet, just because we know that we're getting the information straight from the tax record. It's populated the owner's name for us here. Owner phone, same thing that we talked about. If you put it out, it's out there to all the agents. I prefer to keep that to myself. Occupant type, who is there? Is it the owner? If so, then we got old Nate there in the house. How many stories is it? Schools. This is a big deal, guys. This is what, there's a certain percentage of buyers that buy their property specifically based on these 3 lines almost alone, you know, despite bed and bath count. But location wise, there are certain buyers that will buy it specifically based on these 3. I know that Springfield, Nixa, Ozark, Republic, I believe Willard all have, guess what, their own websites that you can go to, and it will show you district boundaries. Now, I don't want you looking at certainly a previous listing on this property, or even necessarily listings in the neighborhood, unless they are current and active and there's more than one, because, and not necessarily across the street. They need to be close, because sometimes districts lines go right down the middle of Main Street. And if you're on the east side, it's one school. If you're on the west side, it's a different. So make sure you're doing your best to make sure these 3 lines are accurate, because if they're not, then we might have issues. So do everything you can. And if for some reason you can't figure it out 100%, then I want you to put in the marketing remarks, school district boundaries uncertain, buyer to do their own due diligence, to make sure they're put on notice that what I'm putting out there is what I think, but I'm not 100% on that. Bed and bath count, if you've been through the property, because a lot of times the assessor, when they do, you know, they reassess the property, they're not going in it. So they don't know that that sunroom was converted to a 5th bedroom, because it's got a closet and access out of the property. And they don't necessarily have this right, because let's say this was actually a 2-story property, and this is essentially 1 story. So we're going to double that. Let's see what the CRS says. And this is the reason I use this one, because the CRS has pulled a different number, because we got 2390 here. This is the basement area. And then on the flex, it's populated 1137. So when you have a discrepancy like that, I do sometimes come to the RPR. I like the RPR, don't get me wrong. I think it's a great tool, especially if you're working with buyers, because it provides so much information about the property in the neighborhood. I generally don't use it with sellers and finding my information, because there's just so much stuff to wade through that sometimes it's too much when you're trying to find something specific. And again, they're pulling the information from CRS when it goes into the MLS anyway, so I would just prefer to use that. But if I have a huge discrepancy on square footage like that, I can come over here and say, okay, well, let's see what CRS, or what RPR has to say. And guess what? They don't have, oh, there it is. Nope. Like I said, there's so many things to look through. See, they've got the square footage at 910, and that's obviously this particular property has got more than 910 feet. So if you don't know, do to the best of your ability and put square footage uncertain, buyer to do their own due diligence. In this case, I know this property, and each floor is about 1,100 feet. We've got 22 there. We don't have any unfinished upstairs. Below grade, we've got that 910. We've got about 200 underneath there. I didn't add us up the way it's supposed to, 22, 31, whatever. I'm not doing the math correctly there. And then whatever your range is, fill in your range. And if you know the room counts above and below, you can certainly put it here. In square footage provided by. In this case, it's really been provided by us. So I don't necessarily want you to put that in there. If you've got a square footage that appears to be accurate, we've got a 3-2 ranch that's 1,760 feet. If that's what it shows in CRS, that's what it shows in RPR, because we double check just to make sure. Then I want you to put ASSESSOR. I want you to get that out of your purview if you can. I want it on someone else's shoulders if at all possible. Entry, if it is a straight walk-in, I encourage you to put that here, because that's a big deal to a lot of buyers, that I can walk straight into the property. I don't know that I would necessarily brag about it being a walk up or a walk down, but walk in, absolutely. Approximate year built. How many garage stalls does it have? Lot size provided by ASSESSOR. And it's already done that for us down here. Do we have any dock slips? Nope. Do we have any water? Nope. And if you've got any specific view, you can put it there. All right, marketing remarks. You have 2,000 characters available to you. I don't know the last time anyone's actually typed 2,000 characters, but it's all quite lengthy. I want you to think about, I know you've all done MLS searches. I want you to think about, there's two different kinds of properties that pop up. There's the property that pops up that has one single sentence on the marketing remarks and like 6 or 7 different items down below in the agent's name, and that's it. So it's about half to 3/4 of the page long. And then there's another one that has a giant paragraph information about all the great features about this property. It's got a bevy of information below, all filled out. And all of a sudden, you know, from the property that we just looked at that was half a page to 3/4, now we've got one that's, you know, a page and a half, maybe more, depending on how much information you put there. So utilize your marketing remarks as much as you can. I don't want you guys puffing and fluffing, but if your client tells you about all of the great Orioles that are in the backyard this time of year, that's a fact. Your client's telling you that, and that's one of the things that they love about the property. Guess what? That might be something that the new owner would love about it too. So certainly put that in there. All the features in the property. You know, kind of walk through the property in your head and think about the things that caught your eye. And if you've got this, again, paper copy with you as you're walking through the property, your client's going to make comments about things they really like about the property. Those features are the things you should be promoting to the next potential buyer. So utilize that space as much as you can. Agent only remarks, just what it sounds like. The only people that are going to see this are other agents in our MLS. So this would be, you know, client is a day sleeper, only showings between 4 and 6, whatever you need to put in there. If you have a square footage discrepancy, I really would encourage you to put it both places, because I really want everybody on notice that we've done our best to get an accurate square footage, but if you need more accurate numbers, you need to do your own due diligence. Driving directions. Very critical, obviously. In the first page, we made sure our map point was correct. I want you to fill this out with your driving directions, and then I want you to continue on down and fill out the rest of the document. Office remarks only goes to our office. That's what our Facebook is for. In 20 years, I've never put anything in that box. So I want you to fill this document out, keep going, whether you save as incomplete or whatever, and I want you to walk away from it from 20 or 30 minutes. Then I actually want you to come back to driving directions, and I want you to sit at your desk with your imaginary steering wheel in your hand, and I want you to actually drive in your imaginary car based on the directions that you've written down. Because, as I said about tax data and transcribing a number, I know agents personally and very, very well that have written east instead of south, right instead of left, north instead of south. You get my point that one little thing that you write down wrong takes somebody doesn't take them to the property. So make sure that your directions are actually getting the client to the property. And B, something to always keep in mind, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. It's not always the prettiest view. If the shortest distance has you taken by a landfill or, you know, a dump site or whatever that might not be very attractive, and perhaps a little bit longer route takes you through a nice neighborhood or whatever, take them the longer route, because you're setting the stage for that house even before they get there. If they go past all of this stuff that nobody would want to see every day, you've already set the stage for the house. So make sure that you're taking them not only the most direct way if possible, but the best way as far as showing the property for your client. Again, office remarks I've never used. Listing broker is, you're going to be a designated agent. If you've got any co-brokers, you'll put their information here. And then this refers to page 1 of our seller's agency contract, where we indicated what percentage we're going to pay each one. And I told you on this one, it is in a different order than it is on the agency agreement. Agency agreement goes subagent, buyer's agent, transaction. This one obviously is not in that order. So if you happen to be paying those entities different amounts, in our example, we were paying the subagent 3.5. And we were paying, oh, I didn't get my percentages. So that's how we did it on our example earlier. But if you remember on our example earlier, this was the top number, this was the middle number, and that's the bottom. So just most often you guys are going to charge or give the same percentage to all of those entities. But if you do it differently, just make sure that you don't transcribe your numbers there. And then we're going to get to all these boxes that I showed you on the example that you're going to have to check. How are we going to show the property, appointment, vacant, whatever the case may be? What's the lockbox type? It's going to be Supra. If for some reason you have to have a combination lockbox on the property, please, for the love of all that is, do not put the combination code right here. Our Supra boxes give us the ability to know when the box has been opened. That's great. A combination box doesn't do that. So I can give the combination to you, and you could give it to Freddie, and Freddie could give it to Steve, and Steve could give it to Joey, and Joey could say like, hey, I can get in this house. So, and we wouldn't have any idea who it was. So if you have to have a combo box for any reason, don't give out the code. And if you perhaps, we talked about lockbox security earlier, if you've put the lockbox on the back door, I would put it here, but I would also put it in my agent only remarks. I don't want the agent ever having to try to figure out where my lockbox is and calling me because they can't find it. So mark anything you can there. Is there any view? If you got a golf course view, do we have a basement? If so, do you know the type? If you can't tell, don't mark it down. But if you walk down in the basement with your clipboard and your piece of paper, and I can see that it's concrete block, and I can see that it's a walkout, and then it's unfinished, and I got some finished, partially finished, you can check all those things that you need to on your piece of paper. Utility room, also kind of a big deal. People really want to know where that is. Dining room, if there is one, how's our dining set up? I'm not going to check these things. And again, you guys will notice that these are all gray. So you don't have to fill these out. But as I talked about, the more of them that you fill out, the longer your listing becomes. So I'm not going to check boxes just in the interest of time, but keep in mind all these things that you can check, your attic, your other rooms, appliances. This is a great way to have, I've got my clipboard in my hand, it's easy to have that conversation with my client. Okay, we're in the kitchen. What of this are you guys taking? You're taking the fridge, you're leaving the fridge. You're taking the washer dryer, you're leaving those. And I can check on here specifically what appliances are going with this property. Because I do not want to represent on this form that the refrigerator is going if it's not. Now, the agent would have to put that in the actual contract because the MLS does not declare what goes in there, but you still need to indicate what's actually going and what's not. So don't put things that aren't. When it comes to equipment, make sure that your client actually owns whatever you're indicating that you are conveying. Specifically, propane, water softeners, alarm systems, and I had another one recently. Anyway, make sure that if there's anything that you're paying a monthly fee for, that they actually own whatever it is. Because sometimes when you stop paying these companies, the water purifier, they will come take it out, or the alarm systems. And if they don't own that propane tank, then you can't indicate that it's being conveyed with the property, because once the current seller stops paying the bill, if the new client has not arranged something with the propane company, they're going to come take that tank away. And if you've indicated that it goes with the property, guess who's going to be buying a propane tank? Yeah, you. So make sure that anything that you're conveying with the property is actually owned by the seller. Where's the fireplace? What type is it? Again, if you can't tell specifically, don't write it down. But if you know that it's wood burning or pellet burning, mark it. This is another reason I like having my clipboard with me. And I know I keep going back to that, but I can be walking through the property and I can check off that we've got counters that are marble and tile and granite, and that we've got a vaulted ceiling. And oh wait, there's a security system and a skylight. And oh, he's got a wet bar in the basement. Oh, there's a jetted bathtub in the... I can mark all of those things as I go through versus trying to remember them when I get back to my desk to complete my listing. Was that hardwood floor or was that laminate in there? I cannot remember. When I'm there, if I check it down, mark it down, I can remember it a whole lot easier. What kind of flooring have we got? Same thing here. If I'm checking it off as I go through the house, I'm not going to miss anything. Heating and cooling, we talked about this. We need to make sure that it actually is gas. If so, if it's gas, where the gas is coming from. Is it propane? If it's propane, is the tank owned or leased? Is it electric? Okay. Mark all of the things that apply. And again, don't be afraid to go actually look at the units to make sure they're telling you the right thing about how you're doing it. Excuse me, about how they're actually getting their heat and cool. Water heater. If they have any green items, you can check them off. I really encourage you, if you check any of these boxes, I would like to have some sort of paperwork indicating what you've got. So if they bought new energy efficient appliances, hopefully they still have the books for those, and you can just convey the books with them. But I really prefer, if you've got something checked here, that you have a way to prove it, that it's actually Energy Star or green rated. All right, architecture. You can select as many items as you want. Gee, Don, I'm brand new and I don't know where to go. I don't know what to call that house. I don't know if that's a ranch. I don't know if that's a 2-story. I don't know if that's a bungalow. I don't know what that is. Well, guess what? You get to learn, like I think probably all the rest of us did, is go search the MLS and find houses that look like that and see how they're being described, because that's most likely how you're going to learn the best way. This one I would list as a 2-story property. So when in doubt, go with the simplest answer. Don't try to get, don't try to make it Victorian, because this one doesn't really qualify as that, because it doesn't have the right architecture, so to speak. So just make sure that whatever you're marking is as accurate as you can. And hey, guess what? Another thing that you need to keep in mind is it's not pink. So you don't have to fill it in if you don't know. But as I said, the more things that you check, the better off. Outdoor extras, same thing. As I'm walking around, I can check my boxes of all the things that are going on. If there is a storage shed out back, make sure that storage shed is actually going with the property. Same thing with that 6-burner stove in the kitchen. Don't put it in pictures and don't indicate it if it's not going with the property. And if the shed is not going, I want that noted somewhere. Shed not being sold with property, just so it's very clear. I don't ever want to get down to a contract being ratified and then your seller taking the storage shed out, and then that's when I get phone calls because the buyer expected that storage shed to be there. So make sure you're very upfront about anything that is or is not going with the property. What kind of parking do we have? As I talked about the barn and the shed, if they're going, go ahead and mark them here. Fencing, if it's got barbed wire on one side, chain link, and then wood, mark all 3. Whatever it is, just go ahead and mark them down. Windows, what kind do we have? All of the exterior material as it is. So if I've got partial brick and some stone and some vinyl, you can mark all of those things. Foundation, same thing with the basement. If you can't see and don't know, just skip it. Don't mark it. If you can tell what it is, go ahead and mark it down. Roofing material, most often you're going to have composition. You're seeing more and more of the metal roofs now. But if you've got a flat roof and whatever, don't go presuming. I would rather you leave this blank than indicate specific things about a roof that you can't see or don't know, because I don't want it ever coming back on you. Well, you told me that was rubber roof, and it's not. It's whatever. And now you got to go argue about who's going to put the new rubber roof on. What kind of lot do we have? If it's on a cul-de-sac, that's a big deal to a lot of people. Waterfront, I don't know that I would check the fact that it's steep, because that doesn't necessarily draw a lot of people to it, and let them find that out on their own. But anything that they've got, put that in there. Water and sewer. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, please go get me your utility bill. I want to verify that you're actually getting city water and that you are utilizing the city sewer. It will surprise you. There are a number of houses still in the city limits of Springfield that are still on septic systems. And there are also a surprisingly large number of people that live in those houses that don't know they're on a septic system. So make sure that that's actually the case, because I don't want you representing that it is on a sewer and then finding out that it's on septic, and then we get into a big argument about who's going to pay for the $10,000 connection to the sewer. So I like to look at the utility bill, because they'll have a water bill. If they don't have a water bill, they're getting it out of a well, and they will have a sewage bill. If they don't have on sewage, then it's going into a septic tank somewhere. So I like to actually look at the bills and make sure that's the case. Road frontage, if there's anything specific there. Surface, if you want to. If there's an HOA, mark anything that it actually includes. And you got boat docks and slips, and for whatever reason, HOA is down here instead of being up there. But if you know what the actual fees are, if it's an HOA and the dues are $500 a year, and if you happen to know the association contact and phone, I don't think it's a bad idea to go ahead and put that in there, because the buyers may have questions about the association prior to making the offer. And if you've already given them this information, it makes it that much easier. Same thing with attaching the CCRs or HOAs or whatever to your listing, because then it becomes very clear about what the situation is. How are we going to sell this property? Cash, conventional, FHA, USDA. If you're doing any of these others, contract for deed or owner carry second or lease option, we should probably talk before you do that to make sure that everybody's protected. Flood insurance, if you don't know, go ahead and mark status unknown. I would rather that be marked than it be blank. How are we doing possession? Hopefully you're doing possession at closing, because if you're doing it before or after, then that sometimes causes issues. If you have tenants in the property, then you've got to mark that we've got to, whenever we're getting them out. What documents are we attaching to the MLS? Well, disclosures, lead-based paint. We happen to have a water test. We've got a survey. Anything that you want to attach, you can go ahead and click there. Are we doing any kind of warranty? What kind of financing do we think the property will qualify for? Now we got our rooms. So we've done our job. We've gone through and we've measured our rooms. And I can come in here now and I can say, okay, bedroom 1 on level 1 is 15 by 12. And when you have that electronic measuring device, it's going to give you a pretty accurate number. But keep in mind, it's giving you an accurate number in inches, and sometimes you have to do a little conversion, and your numbers will end up something like this that don't make any sense. Normally what I put was room sizes approximate. I put that on every single picture because, again, I'm telling you to the best of my ability what it is, but I don't want you to have a bed that happens to be 15.6 inches across that you wanted to line the entire wall with, and it turns out that the room's only 15.5 and 5 across. I don't want to go through that. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you room sizes are approximate on every single one. And you can just keep adding rooms as many as you want to. And then we get to the last page. If for some reason they don't want it on the internet, they don't want it to be able to be seen by other agents on the internet, they don't want to see comments on the internet, or if they don't want it to any one of these particular 3 entities, we can prevent that. Most often you're going to leave this page exactly as it sits and move on. So assuming we've gotten all of our, even if we haven't gotten all of our pink items filled in, we're going to go print our listing and we're going to go take our listing with all of our other paperwork. Once we've done that, we can finish it. And then this is where we're going to upload our photos, our seller's disclosures, any actual video that we have. And, with all that we have currently going on, you will probably more than likely be utilizing this because video walkthroughs are kind of what we're heading towards right now. But this is where you put all that information. And then once I had everything filled out, all the pink items filled out, I can click this add listing. This one's going to tell me I've got errors because I don't have every one of the blanks appropriately filled out. And thank goodness for that, so I didn't just list that property. And then you can go back and you can figure out which one those things are. It'll tell you here, street number to 0. No, it's not communicating right now. And you'll click on that add listing button is the way you do it once everything's uploaded. And then it will look a little bit different than this because it won't have incomplete up here. It will just have a change number, but you can come here and print or email this listing now with all of the information that we've put in there. You can print the input form. You can also email it to yourself. This is the way that I typically do it. I don't know that it's the right way or the wrong way, but I will come up here and I'm going to print it. But I'm going to save it. Hang on, I got to move this out of my way. I'm going to save it as a PDF on my computer somewhere. We'll call that one, just save it as it is there. And then when I'm over here with this one that we couldn't bring in, then all I'm gonna do, and it'll be the same way, and you guys know how to import into DocuSign, but it's the same thing, is I actually have to go find that version that I downloaded from the MLS because there's no other place to have it. You could have a copy of it in .loop or in DocuSign, but in order to do that, you would essentially have to fill it out twice. And there's no reason for that. When you can just do that, and then it's automatically in wherever it needs to be. So just have a folder on your computer and print it or email it to yourself, however you want to get it to yourself, but that's the way we actually get that into the system. All right, questions? Anyone? Bueller?
Hey, Dan,
Yep.
on the HOAs, are they carried over to the new buyer? I mean, if it's been paid?
Typically what will happen with that is that will also be prorated. Sometimes if it's 25 or 50 bucks, the seller says, don't worry about it. But if it's like a $500 HOA and you close this time of year, your seller would just pay for whatever percentage they'd used, and the buyer's going to pay that kind of like they do their taxes and everything else. They'll just prorate them through the rest of the year.
And if the seller had not been making their HOA payments, does that fall back on the buyer when they buy? Or
That
no?
would be something that would be discovered in the title search. And that would be
Okay.
something that we would have a dispute over the title because of that, because most likely the HOA would have some sort of lien on the property. And that's what we need to be concerned about, is a lien. If I buy a property and the HOAs aren't up to date and they're not going to penalize me for that, then I don't care. I do care if they've already put a lien on that address and that address won't be clean until that's paid, because that's when I want to get it from the previous seller. If they don't care, if they'll just let me start fresh, I'm not going to worry what that seller has done before me.
Good, okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, if you had to go out and write a listing today, could you do it? If not, tell me what you're concerned about. All right, well, that's what I got for you today, gang.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you all being on. I haven't even looked to see who all's on here. Let's just see.
Thank you.
Dana, Nancy, Sheila, Daniel, Kelly, Kurt. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining. And as always, if you've got questions for me, absolutely call me, 827-6275. If you have not sent me your name to be in my phone, please do. 827-6275. Just text me your name. That way you're in my phone. So when you have questions, I can know that it's you and not a solicitor. So
Okay.
have a great day, guys.
You too. Thanks.
Bye,
bet.
thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. See ya.